Across 30 constituencies, Barbadians have been casting their ballots to elect a new government in Barbados today, Thursday, May 24th. We continue full team coverage of Election Day this lunchtime. In Bridgetown, I'm Julius Giddens. Good afternoon. The midpoint now of Election Day 2018 sees a trend of steady voting continuing from among 255,000 odd registered voters who've been going about the business of the day in an orderly fashion, but there have been reports of hiccups in a process that involves some 313 polling stations. In some cases, the vote has slowed amid lengthening queues and raising frustration among many who opted to vote first, work later. But we begin our team coverage in the densely populated suburban constituencies of St. Michael Northeast and St. Michael Northwest. Our Emmanuel Joseph brings us up to date now in these two large communities about 3 miles outside the capital. Manny.
I'm here at the LRC Secondary School polling station in the constituency of St. Michael Northwest of incumbent Democratic Labour Party's Chris Sinclair. Now, this is just one of the 3 polling stations I visited today. The others were St. Michael North of the incumbent Barbados Labour Party's Ronald Toppin and the Barbados Labour Party leader Mia Motley in St. Michael North East. But today's process was not without incident, particularly at the Grisettes Primary School polling station and the Eden Lodge Primary School polling station. Some people complained of being frustrated at the long delays in waiting to vote. Others were more peeved about being turned back because they did not have particular documentation to hand. But one former presiding officer said no one should be stopped or prevented from voting even though they did not have the documentation to hand. She said there's a provision to get around that. But all in all, today's process was smooth running. It's quiet here now at Ellerslie Secondary School, but I can tell you that today of note to me were the large number of young people, particularly women, who turned out to vote in this general election. I'm Emmanuel Joseph from Ellerslie Secondary School polling station for Barbados Today.
Emmanuel Joseph there from the crucial St. Michael corridor, the 2 communities of Eden Lodge and Black Rock. Now, another important prize for the political parties is Christchurch and its 5 seats. It's there we find Colville Mounsey. And to the north now, the heavy turnout was at times a bit too much for polling officers, as Marlon Madden now reports.
Light intermittent showers did not deter hundreds of voters from casting their votes in the constituencies of St. Thomas, St. James South and St. James North this morning. When our team arrived at the Lester Vaughan School, one of the main polling stations in the parish of St. Thomas, more than 100 people were seen in 2 lines, while a trickle of others were seen leaving the location. Some residents in line were dressed for work. The registering officer, as well as some residents waiting in line, complained that the Lester Vaughan location was congested and that the process was simply too slow. Other locations in the parish of St. Thomas that we visited, as well as polling stations in St. James South and St. James North, we observed a relatively smooth process. When we arrived at the Good Shepherd Primary School shortly after 10 a.m., a 92-year-old woman was seen who said she just cast her vote and she thanked the Lord for allowing her to do so. A number of younger voters were also seen leaving the location. It is expected that people will continue to trickle into the various locations as they cast their votes throughout the day. Marlon Madden reporting for Barbados Today.
Further north and the rural northeastern parish of St. Andrew, where there were reports of a heavy turnout, but contrasting opinions. The Democratic Labour Party's candidate, Irene Sandiford Garner, told Barbados Today it was not a seamless operation for voters.
The turnout out here is heavy, but the problem is that the process has been pretty slow, so people are becoming very frustrated because obviously you come at a time that fits into your schedule, your work schedule, so I've just asked people to be patient. Some of them are asking me if it's deliberate, and I'm telling them no. You have some elderly people who need assistance. What we probably may have to look at doing is dividing the boxes into, instead of having the 2, 3, have 4, so that you can speed up the process, because as it is, you can see the line is in the road, and if the rain comes down, you're going to have a very untidy situation inside, and you don't want chaos. This process has to be very smooth and it has to be seamless. So you cannot have that. So I think that going forward, that is something they're going to have to look at, because there are classrooms there you can use. You're going to have to divide the boxes further, because this is a heavy box. This is a dense area. This is a box or a polling district with over 2,000 voters. So we can't operate at the same level anymore. And every year you find that the numbers have increased. So that's something the EBC will have to look at.
But her rival, the incumbent MP, George Payne, of the Barbados Labour Party, says he's happy with the heavy turnout, which he feels will be in his favour.
I have never been this confident about an election. And so far, I would say that everything is going perfect. And I believe that this is going to be one of my best elections in terms of numbers.
So despite the hiccups, it appears that little could dampen the spirits of voters who, after a 3-week campaign, are having their say this day in an historic election being contested by a record 9 political parties and 10 independents. On the road, Barbados Today spoke with some voters who were only too happy to have cast their ballots.
I've always done it from time I was of age. And this is my country. So, we got to keep the country going.
Always going. That's my right.
To the team now of Kobe Brooms and Amory Aline, out and about in St. Michael South Central, St. Michael East and St. Michael Central. Kobe, give us an afternoon sense of what's been playing out in these battleground constituencies.
Hundreds of voters have already made their way to the polling stations in the constituencies of St. Michael East, St. Michael South East and St. Michael South Central. I'm here at the Erdiston Teachers Training College, where there is a steady line of voters who are going to cast their ballot. While we were here, we saw the Democratic Labour Party candidate for St. Michael South Central, Richard Seeley, who told us that his team observed some discrepancies at polling stations, but he said the officials from the Electoral and Boundaries Commission quickly worked on resolving that problem. While here, we also spoke to the United Progressive Party candidate for St. Michael South Central, David Gill, who said that he was sure that his constituents would make the right choice. We're also over at the Parkinson Memorial School this morning, where hundreds of persons lined the hallways to cast their ballot from as early as 6 a.m. this morning. Now, this is shaping up to be a terrific election. We're only hours away now from the polls being closed and for the much anticipated results. Reporting from the Erdiston Teachers Training College, I'm Kobe Brooms, Barbados Today.
All right, thank you. Well, now we move to the parish of St. Philip in the rural southeastern end of the island and home to 3 seats, where we join Fenella Wedderburn for an afternoon update. Good afternoon, Fenella.
Steady voting continues in St. Philip, Julius, but unlike this morning, there are no long lines. Over the last several hours, I have been to around 11 polling stations in St. Philip North, West, and South. The presiding officers there told me that there have been no incidents as people from all walks of life continue to exercise their franchise. I met up with political leader of the United Progressive Party, Lynette Eastman, DLP candidate for St. Philip North, Michael Lashley, DLP St. Peter candidate, Dave Cumberbatch, BLP candidate for St. Philip West, John King, and BLP candidate for St. Philip North, Dr. Sonia Brown. All of them are telling Barbados Today that they are confident of a victory at today's polls, saying that they have put in the necessary groundwork. Among those we also saw voting at the Bailey's Primary School today was former St. John MP Mara Thompson and her 2 daughters. So all in all, Julius, voting continues in the east, where the DLP candidates are the incumbents in all 3 constituencies: Lashley in St. Philip North, David Estwick in St. Philip West, and Adriel Brathwaite in St. Philip South. All 3 are being challenged by new candidates. And currently, Julius, I'm still at the Bailey's Primary School, where the media, we are currently awaiting the Prime Minister Frondell Stewart, who is scheduled to we're told, I can't say schedule at this time, who we're told is expected to vote after lunch. Back to you, Julius.
Next, a tale of two strongholds of the political parties. St. John, held by the incumbent Democratic Labour Party, and the Barbados Labour Party stronghold of St. Peter, both rural constituencies. First, we get this update from Randy Bennett in St. John and Anmar Goodrich-Boyce in St. Peter.
Under overcast conditions this morning, voters from St. John were slowly but surely turning out in their numbers to cast their votes for today's general election. When Barbados Today visited several of the polling stations, only a few numbers were observed going to cast their ballots. These include the Owen Esway and Earl Glasgow Auditorium at the Law School, the St. John's Primary School, the St. John's Parish Church, and the Horatio Cook Sports Complex. All three of these polling stations opened at 6 a.m. sharp, and according to reports, there have been no incidents so far. One officer who was situated at the St. John's Primary School estimated that between 100 to 150 people had already cast their ballots. He said he expected that number to increase as the day went on.
Residents in the north of the island, St. Peter and St. Lucie in particular, wasted no time in exercising their democratic right to vote. There were long lines at several centres across the parishes, which signal a steady flow and possible high voter turnout. We actually visited 7 polling stations: the Alexandra School, Half Moon Fort Primary, Cogent Parish School, Salvation Army Church, St. Lucie Primary, the William Donald George Parish Centre, and All Saints Primary. Just around 10 a.m., BLP candidate for St. Peter, Colin Jordan, arrived at the All Saints School flanked by his wife Charmaine, who was all smiles to mark their ex.
I am feeling pretty good. The turnout in St. Peter, I've gone to all the polling stations already, and the turnout has been relatively heavy. And the faces in the lines of my constituents have been generally happy as they saw me. I take that as a sign to say that they are with me.
We also saw former DLP candidate for St. James North, Austin Husbands, who was among early voters.
As usual, I like to be one of the first people at the polling station because it's absolutely important that I exercise my franchise, and that's the reason I'm here. And the process is quite quick, actually. I think that they opened on time, which is a good sign, because quite often, you have a long wait because they're not working as quickly as they should. But they did a very good job. They've done a good job so far, in that they've got the process moving, and it's very efficiently done.
Some walk while others turn up by carfuls, young and old. In the parish of St. Peter, it's a three-way battle between BLP Colin Jordan, DLP's Dave Cumberbatch, and Barbados Integrity Movement Leroy Scanterbury. Reporting for Barbados Today, I'm Anmar Goodrich-Boyce.
And that's been our lunchtime update. You can join us again this evening as we put a wrap on today's vote and get ready for the big night, the analysis, the results, and the reaction as the new government is selected. Our watch on the count begins at 7 o'clock East Caribbean time here at barbadostoday.bb and also on Facebook. From Barbados Today, I'm Julius Giddens. Good afternoon.